And with that, we say hello and welcome to CBS Sports HQ, delivered by Papa John's. New grilled buffalo chicken papadilla, just $6. In just his second collegiate start, Stetson Bennett IV proved he's not just a one-hit wonder. After helping Georgia beat Auburn last week, the kid nicknamed the Mailman delivered yet again, this time against Tennessee in the SEC on CBS Game of the Week. Ranked on ranked matchup, SEC on CBS Game of the Week. Georgia's won the last 3 games in the series, and it has been lopsided. Tennessee has scored 26 points combined in those 3 games. Kirby Smart, Jeremy Pruitt sharing pregame pleasantries. Stetson Bennett IV coming off his first career start. A win against Auburn. Didn't start well, though. Second play from scrimmage. High snap over the head of Stetson Bennett. Ball bounces back 30 yards, and it's recovered by Tennessee for a touchdown. So it's 7-0 just like that. Vols. The Vols are riding an 8-game win streak, looking to make it 9. They're feeling pretty good. Early second, tied at 7. Bennett takes off towards the right sideline. Dive to the pylon, and he's in. 8-yard touchdown. Georgia up 14-7. Caps off a 12-play, 95-yard drive. Kid's nicknamed the Mailman. He delivers. He wore a U.S. Postal Service hat to stand out at football camps growing up. Well, he stood out in this game. After Georgia turns it over on downs, next play, Jarrett Guarantano delivers. Josh Palmer, 36-yard touchdown. Tennessee ties the game at 14. Very next Vols drive. Guarantano to the end zone once again for Palmer. And Brad Nessler had this right. They didn't even need to go to review this. He called it was a touchdown. Call on the field overturned, touchdown Tennessee. Palmer, 2 catches, 63 yards, 2 catches, 2 touchdowns. Pretty good. Like to have a couple more, though. Georgia stuffed on 4th down earlier in the game. Down 4, they go for it. 1 second left, and they are stuffed once again. Zamir White, a goal line stand for Tennessee. And prior to Saturday, Georgia was 2 for 3 on 4th down, 0 for 2 in the first half. Vols up 21-17 going to halftime. That guy's pumped. Now, it was a tale of 2 halves for Jarrett Guarantano. Near perfect in the first half. He had 2 incompletions, 2 touchdowns. Second half filled with mistakes. After Tennessee had not turned the ball over all season, fumbles on the first drive of the 3rd quarter, throws a pick on the 2nd drive. UGA kicked 2 field goals to take the lead, 23-21, the overcast of the 2nd field goal. Under a minute left in the 3rd. 3rd and 7, Bennett over the middle to Kieris Jackson. That was one of the playmakers that Barrett Salee said he wanted to see stand out. 21-yard touchdown there. Georgia up 30-21. 4th quarter, Guarantano under pressure, stripped by Monty Rice. Rice takes it to the house. Scoop and score. Georgia up 44-21. Coming in this game, Georgia had allowed just 16 points. Guarantano, 3rd turnover of the 2nd half. First 10 quarters, 0 zippy turnovers. Last 2 quarters, 3 turnovers. And Georgia rolls 44-21 as they snap Tennessee's 8-game winning streak. And Stetson Bennett IV, 3 total touchdowns in this game, a rushing and 2 passing touchdowns. Georgia's now won 21 of its last 22 home games. All right, let's take you back out to Athens. Welcome in one of the best in the business, lead play-by-play announcer for the SEC on CBS, Brad Nessler. Brad, Stetson Bennett IV with 3 total touchdowns helping Georgia beat Tennessee. What are your impressions of the young man nicknamed the Mailman?
Well, you know, he continues to impress everybody, especially in this part of the country, because at the beginning of the season, he was so far down the depth chart that's why he was Stetson Bennett the fourth, because he was 4th on the depth chart. But he's proved again today that he's going to grow week in and week out. I think he finds himself, you know, in more and more situations where he calms down a little bit. He took him out of the fire in the Arkansas game, and then he played really well against Auburn, another 200-plus passing day with 2 touchdowns, and then the one that you said, the rushing touchdown as well. So he gives them a little versatility that they maybe didn't have even with Jake Fromm. You know, Jake earlier in his career ran the ball a little bit more. This guy's not afraid to put his head down. He's not afraid to not slide. And I think he's earning the respect from his teammates as he goes along week in and week out.
Something I also noticed, nice to see more and more fans there at Sanford Stadium, of course, doing their best to stay socially distanced. What's that been like to have fans back in the stadium?
We'll take any fans we can get, guys. You know, we have about 20,000, it seems like, each week, and it'll be the same story in Alabama next week. I think, you know, Georgia fans took some flack for not being spread out so much a week ago, and I think they got that situation straightened out. It's just nice that we're still playing ball and we have some crowd noise in here, and, you know, it's not our normal 93,000 in Athens, but we'll take the 20,000, and they had a good time. They made a lot of noise in the second half.
Yeah, and you'll have plenty of noise next week in the SEC on CBS Game of the Week, a big one. Georgia and Alabama renewing pleasantries in primetime. The Tide have won 5 straight in the series. Last time Georgia beat Alabama was in 2007. Matthew Stafford tossed the game-winning touchdown in overtime. That game was played in Tuscaloosa. Next week's game is in Tuscaloosa. What are your expectations for this monster matchup?
Well, it's going to be the best game of the year so far, you know, and we'll have to wait and see what happens with Alabama tonight. But obviously, they've got a defense right now that's getting better week in and week out. I think it's going to be more like the Alabama defenses we saw of old, just not there yet. And, you know, Dylan Moses, having him back to kind of lead the defense. Mac Jones and the offense, you know, they haven't skipped a beat. And don't worry about Tua playing for the Dolphins, because Mac Jones is doing his thing and throwing it around to Waddle, Devontae Smith, and then he added John Mechie to the group last week against Texas A&M. So they're right back where they used to be. 3 great receivers. Najee Harris, who's a Heisman Trophy candidate in the backfield. Good offensive line, and the defense is getting better. So Georgia's going to have to strap it up. I mean, this is a big win for them, especially getting behind in the first half against a good Tennessee team. But they showed their resiliency and their character to come back and win the second half, win the game, and now they know they've got a big one coming up in primetime next week.
Looking forward to it. Brad, appreciate the time. Brad Nessler joining us here on CBS Sports HQ. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.
Brad Nessler, one of the best in the business, joining us here post-game, delivered by Papa John's. And, hey, Georgia covers the 12. 31% of the tickets, Georgia on the money line at -500. Hope you had the over as well, over 43.5. That seemed to be a sharp play. All right, let's welcome in 2-time Super Bowl champ Bryant McFadden, CBS Sports HQ college football analyst Barrett Sallee, and Chip Patterson. And before we get going, I want to take you back to Friday night here on CBS Sports HQ.
I'm going over. I'm taking it over. Listen, I know it might be a bit strange for me to do this, but I'm fired up. I already put my ticket in, and I'm ready because my hands are itching. So I suggest you guys that are watching me currently follow my footsteps, because I'm going in the right direction.
I'm not going to follow your footsteps because you're wrong.
Well, you know what, Barrett? I will also own that as well, because credit where credit's due. B-Mac, you were right. We were wrong.
You know what? In all honesty, when Barrett followed me, he had some valid points, and I totally forgot about the potential weather storm, thunderstorm-like weather that might be involved in today's matchup. And then I remember, you know, that could really hurt the chances of seeing the over happen. But luckily enough for me and for everybody who took the over, the weather was good. Good. You didn't have any rain. Granted, it was cloudy, but you had, you know, ideal weather to be able to put up points on the scoreboard. And we saw an explosion of points from UGA, and what I think helped me, guys, in feeling confident that I could get this over. The second play, the high snap that led to a touchdown, those are bonus points for me. Anytime you get a touchdown, special team wise or defensively, those are bonus points when you look at the betting angle. So when I saw that happening and seeing how well they were playing in the second half, and we talked about it at halftime show, Hakeem, yes, I was sitting in a real good spot to be able to achieve the over. I just didn't want Hakeem to burn the money for me, because he was saying I already hit the over and that I hadn't hit it yet.
Well, you know, I already knew. I looked into my crystal ball, and I already knew that was going to hit the over. Especially, you're right, on the second play from scrimmage, Barrett, they get a touchdown as Tennessee recovers a fumble on a bad snap, and you knew, okay, maybe the floodgates are going to open. It was 21-17 at halftime.
Yeah, it was. And Tennessee, I think, did a really good job of hanging in that game. They obviously took advantage of the mistakes. But I think the biggest thing in the first half was the fact that Jarrett Guarantano looked like the Jarrett Guarantano that he was supposed to look like when he was a hotshot recruit, and tossing it up to Josh Palmer, a pretty good strategy. So I think Tennessee, it wasn't just the lucky breaks. It wasn't just the turnovers. They actually, I think, did play a pretty solid first half, and I think had Georgia on the ropes. Look, that defense is legit. We saw that in the first half. In the second half, it all fell fell apart. But yeah, this one, I did not see this going. The weather had a little bit to do with it, the fact that it didn't rain the way I think a lot of us thought. But in the end, I think the fact that Georgia's defense came to play in the second half, made the proper adjustments, that told the tale.
You also had Georgia on the spread, and so did Chip Patterson on the CBS Sports College Football pregame show. Chip, what were your impressions of Stetson Bennett IV? Clearly not a one-hit wonder, now 2-0 as a starter.
I think he's done a great job, but I do think that we have to continue to entertain the idea that this Georgia quarterback position is a job that needs to be won on a week-in, week-out basis, because he did, again, 2 total touchdowns. For the most part, was able to orchestrate everything within the framework of the offense, but, you know, it was a lot of Zeus White. We got McIntosh involved. You had to really find your spots. I did not think it was a dominating performance from Stetson Bennett IV, though certainly when you're on the winning side of this, it is easier to feel better and continue to build confidence. You know, Brad Nessler sort of hinted at it in his comments earlier with the idea that it is going to be a week-by-week thing for him to be able to continue to take steps forward. Because look, we still had some bad mistakes. We still had some turnovers, and against another team that with maybe a little bit more offensive consistency than Tennessee, and Tennessee's offense, I think, didn't play its best game here, then you might get burned. Stetson Bennett IV cannot make those same mistakes against Alabama, or it will end up costing Georgia the game. So I give him a 2 thumbs up. Great job, slap on the back, pouch a red man for you to take home. But at the same time, let's continue to entertain the idea that this quarterback position is something that needs to be reevaluated on a week-by-week basis.
B-Mac, what did you see from Stetson Bennett IV?
He didn't shoot himself in the foot. I think that has been the most impressive thing about his ball game, about his game, right? Being able to be smart with the football and protect the football. Hakeem, you remember we talked about, I mentioned halftime for Guarantano to be smart with the football, play clean football. He didn't do that, and because of that, we saw an onslaught of big-time plays defensively from UGA. Stetson has been smart with the football. He dodged a few mistakes today. They should have had at least 2 interceptions, in my opinion, that they dropped. But he's been smart with the football. And with the defense that he has, if he plays that type of football, they will be able to be in a national championship conversation. Because I think that defense, for 4 quarters, they don't slow down. They keep coming, and eventually they will kick down the door to provide big opportunities for their offense via turnovers. So for me, I think that is the most impressive thing, and I think he will get better. But one thing I would like to see happen with the offensive identity guys, when we saw Tennessee's defense just dominating the line of scrimmage and being able to have a lot of success against UGA's offense, speed up the tempo, go fast, try to find a way to get them on their heels. Because me as a former defensive player, that's the one thing I didn't like. Being able to always be ready to go. Never being able to, not necessarily get to the huddle, but be able to gather my thoughts. That's the best way to get success going if you have been a bit stagnant offensively because you can't get a rhythm. Find a way to increase the tempo and get things going with him, but yet and still they won the ball game. Another building block for me, but being smart with the football is the most impressive thing.
Yeah, you know, we don't know if Stetson can go win a game with his arm. I think in that game, even in the second quarter, late in the second quarter, when things weren't going Georgia's way, I think it was pretty clear that they were still being conservative. They didn't really feel threatened by Tennessee's offense, so they didn't ask Stetson to do an awful lot. So we still don't know if he can go win a game with his arm if his defense lets him down, which, let's be honest, this defense doesn't look like it will, but they haven't played Alabama yet, so we'll see how that goes. Hadn't played Florida yet in Kyle Pitts, so we'll see how that goes. I think the biggest thing for me was that Kearis Jackson had another big game. George Pickens, everybody knows about him. Everybody's going to focus attention on him, but he's going to benefit the most with what Stetson Bennett has done with Kearis Jackson over the last couple of games, and that's going to help Stetson Bennett potentially go out and be able to win a game with his arm. So that was the biggest development. I don't think that Kirby Smart and Todd Monken and that staff really felt like they needed to put too much pressure on Stetson Bennett in this game. But I do think that they've sort of laid the foundation, laid the groundwork for what he might have to do in bigger games against teams with more explosive offenses.
And on the flip side, and Barrett, you mentioned this, Jarrett Guarantano was really a tale of 2 halves for him. He was near perfect in the first half and then just mistake after mistake in the second half. B-Mac, I'll go to you first here, and then Chip, I want to get you to follow. What was the difference?
The pressure. I think going into half, they had a lead, and I felt like the entire offense got complacent. Because when you start seeing turnovers, you're getting relaxed. You feel like the ball game has been won. And when you're playing against a team that has championship aspirations like UGA, especially with that defense, you cannot afford to get relaxed until there's no time left on the clock. And that's what we saw. And that's why I harped on Guarantano and the entire Tennessee offense playing clean football, because even with those early turnovers in the second half, their defense came out and they bowled their back up and they forced 3 points instead of allowing touchdowns. They fought, but eventually they wore down in the fourth quarter. You cannot afford to give a very, very good team extra possessions when you're not on the same level. Tennessee, they're not yet there in that conversation of being very, very good. They're still trying to figure out who they are as a ball club. And what he did was he provided a very good team more opportunities to give their offense possessions. And that was the telling tale for me, was just the second half difference from what we saw on both sides of the football, UGA's defense and Tennessee's offense.
Yeah, Georgia's defense is not only the best in the country, they are the best second half defense in the entire country. They have allowed just 6 points in the second half this season. That is 1 field goal against Arkansas in the opener. That is 1 field goal against Auburn in its second game, and a total second half shutout here against Tennessee. I mean, it's like the third quarter starts, the Georgia defense comes out and says, y'all don't worry about a thing. It's winning time. And then they just go out there and they totally dominate. And it's so often we've called this Georgia defense a boa constrictor. And it's like the second half is when it squeezes the life out of its opponent. And again, those 2 field goals, those were third quarter field goals. Not a single opponent has scored a point in the fourth quarter against Georgia. They are a winning time defense. They dominate in the second half, and that is what we saw. Tennessee is just another victim of the Georgia boa constrictor.
Yeah, and Jarrett Guarantano, look, Jarrett Guarantano's had plenty of chances, and really he has not progressed. And look, I know there's been a lot of turmoil at Tennessee elsewhere, so it's not all on him. But I think Tennessee fans at halftime really thought that this was going to be Jarrett Guarantano's time, that he actually was breaking out of the funk, the Jekyll and Hyde situation that he's had for his entire career. And let's be honest, I think he gave them every reason for hope in the first half. Some of those passes, including the second one to Josh Palmer for the touchdown, they were perfect. They were exactly what they recruited him for, what they signed him for. But in the second half, when pressure gets in his face, he crumbles. And I think if you're Jeremy Pruitt, you have to look at your quarterback situation and say, all right, look, Jarrett's the experienced guy, but is he going to be this much of a liability in crunch time? Because at some point, you just can't roll with him.
And when Jeremy Pruitt took the Tennessee job in 2018, Tennessee Athletic Director Phil Fulmer told him the head coach of Tennessee going to be judged by 3 games, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Jeremy Pruitt now 0-7 against Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Not good. Hey, check out BMAC on his new podcast, All Things Covered, joined by former LSU star and Cardinals corner Patrick Peterson. And check out Chick Patterson and his crew on the Cover 3 podcast. Weekly Lock segment is a fan favorite. All Things Covered and the Cover 3 podcast. Download and subscribe today. Just getting started here on the SEC postgame show delivered by Papa John's. More analysis as we break down the SEC on CBS Game of the Week as Georgia beats Tennessee.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.